behaviors. There's been times where it's been really problematic. There were times where it actually saved my life. And then there was times where I've gotten to a point where I'm sustainable, and I recognize as well that I'm, middle-class white privileged at this point in my life, and I don't know where I'll be tomorrow, but I'm okay with who I am, and I think part of that is the education and the networking as well, and recognizing that I have the right to my own self-determination, and that gives me the power to then reduce the harms for myself and still be proud in who and what I do, who I am and what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Shar. We kind of went a little off track for our questions. I think this is a really important piece of the conversation that we actually hadn't planned to have. But I'll just bring us back to, we had some questions about there's a need for diversity and harm reduction options across the province, and there are many best practices and standards that exist, but they're not consistently followed. What are some things that we need in order to better support harm reduction-based work across the province?
Well, for me, I would just like to, I recognize that problematic substance use can definitely affect communities, but I really think we need to remove community consultation, because it just actually gives people of power and privilege who are opposed to harm reduction like a level playing field to just prevent the services that we know that are life-saving and that give people supports in what they do. It's just a constant challenge for people to be navigating systems that are volatile, and that the violence and stigma and discrimination perpetuated on us in communities that do not support harm reduction publicly is actually one of the biggest challenges that I see for many of us.
So, and you are dealing with some of those challenges very directly. And further away from Vancouver, the reality can be very different in the province. So, specifically, what are some of the challenges that you're running into?
Well, to be blatantly honest, I guess, we have a municipal leader who has his own ideals around harm reduction. He has publicly stated, has harm reduction gone too far? His latest is really saying that the overdose crisis is actually a crisis of crime. Continues to perpetuate what I actually call actual hate crimes. They are hate crimes, and when we're talking about a community that is not ready and doesn't have the education and still works from a base of ignorance, you're actually continuing to perpetuate those thoughts rather than working together to create community readiness, to share knowledge, and to talk about cost-benefit analysis about the harm reduction approaches in which we have. It just continues this awful cycle of stigma that continues to create barriers for people to access, and it's just, and my community is not the only community that I see this in, but they have such power and privilege that their voices are constantly heard and ours never are, and so it just, community members quite often buy in because they have those stigmatizing ideals that they have for whatever reason, and we're not able to challenge and educate for fear of retribution. Yeah.
So what can people do to help?
I'll leave that one alone.
Well, Sherry said money would be good.
Oh, certainly, yes. Funding to empower drug user organizations is really important. And I guess maybe that's something I would like to speak to just a little bit, is that, and I think Kevin and the rest of us can recognize that as well, that, there's these huge, large pockets of funding that are coming out for the overdose crisis, and yet people are lining their pockets and have these really amazing jobs with 6 figures, and we get, by the time it trickles down to us who are doing the boots on the ground, who are quite often facing reversing overdoses successfully and not successfully of the people we love, we are not treated with any equity in our pay or our supports around job security. We're supported in an abstinence-based role, and we're hired with our experience of substance use, but we're also fired for it as well. So there's a real inequity around that engagement. But funding is a huge thing because we do our work and we do it really well, and we do it for pennies on the dollar compared to other stuff, and we get shit done. Yeah, we don't sit back and say, how do we do this? We just do it.
And then what about for like people who are allies in the room or working in healthcare or other areas? What can we do to support?
Well, I think that one of the things that healthcare providers could be doing is supporting, essentially like letting us have ownership of the table. Like we're often invited into these spaces, right, with healthcare providers, with the health authority representatives, and it's not a safe space for people who use drugs. They'll put out all of this documentation and literature about creating safe space and for peers, but then you go to the meeting and it's extremely tokenistic and patronizing, and I don't know. I mean, for me, I think it needs to be on level playing ground. Like there needs to be real consultation with people who use drugs, and then there's that spectrum of engagement, and it has to move from just that consultation piece to the actual development, and making sure that we're able to hold these health authorities accountable. Like one of the things that I was thinking needs to happen is that all of the OPSs currently in the province need to be mandated to hire people who use drugs. It should be across the board, right? That should be a starting point. And I don't know, my own experience working at an OPS in a monolithic nonprofit housing organization, it's not a safe place for people to use drugs. I like to be open about my substance use, and it's not a safe place to do that, right? So we need to recognize that by involving people who use drugs and by involving peers, you're breaking down that stigma. You're breaking down that self-appointed sense of we know what's best for people who use drugs, because like God forbid people who use drugs know what's best for them, right? In Nanaimo, it's the same thing. I remember talking to a city councillor saying that we're a bunch of drug users, and that really, they said to me, they're like, that's going to really make people uncomfortable. But I don't know where I was going with that. I'm glad that it makes them uncomfortable though. So,
right. So
yeah.
does that make it okay for those kind of providers to steal our ideas and run off with them and call them their own? I don't think so.
Yeah, give credit where credit's due.
Right.
So you said quite a bit about why it's important for there to be like peer leadership in services like OPSs. Could you say a bit more about what we need to do to get there?
What we need to do to get there. Well, VCH started something like that, had peers being part of an advisory committee, which lasted for about a year, which I think there should be more of that. There should be more of us involved in decision making, and also in every aspect, really. Anywhere we're needed, we can be used. They should actually put us there.
And Paul, you had a good example last night of like using the example of naloxone, where.
At first, when we were doing the take-home naloxone, there had to be a nurse present, and the nurse had to sign off the scripts in order for us to do that. And now it's moved on to now my group at Robert and Lily Lee are doing take-home naloxone at Vancouver Detox every Wednesday. So it's gone to that point. It could even go even further, to have just peer-run OPSs.
Yeah, so in 2012, it was almost inconceivable that you actually needed a doctor to prescribe. It was almost inconceivable that it would ever be at a place where without doctor prescribing, there could be fully peer-run naloxone distribution programs. So I think a lot of the barriers that we imagine might not be as hard to get over as we think they are.
Yeah, well, we need to be treated like adults, and that's what really is a problem with the system, is if you have mental health issues, they put you in little pajamas and they make all the decisions for you. They do the same thing with people who use drugs. So we're adults, and we pretty much know what we're doing.
Kevin, did you have another?
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to bring up was, if you want to support us, stop exploiting us. When you look at the amounts that experiential harm reduction workers are being paid to provide life-saving services in their SROs or at peer-run OPSs that are run by some of these large nonprofit housing organizations, and the peer component is a program of said housing organization. For example, I hear about people being paid $8 an hour to provide harm reduction services, and that's just fucked up. That's just fucked up, because at a top-down institutional service provider, they're paying, what, $22, $25 an hour? But for some reason, it's just history repeating itself, And I think that's an important thing. If you want to support people who use drugs and support all of this stuff that you're talking about, then provide the funding to pay people a fair wage. And actually more, because we are the experts. We have knowledge that people coming at it who don't have that lived experience don't have. So actually maybe we should be getting compensated more for that.
Thanks, Kevin. Is there anything else that folks would want to add to the discussion that we've already had? So we wanted to leave some room for questions at the end of the discussion. So we could open the floor now, and we've got close to 10 minutes. If folks could just grab a mic, I think, in one of the aisles. We'd be happy to answer questions.
Hi. So we were talking about peer-led services, and I believe one of the services that when we talk about treatment and detox and stuff, that I think every aspect and every service should have people with lived experience, including treatment, recovery. I think cannabis and CBD oil and edibles should also be implemented in some of the services for people that are wanting to quit drinking or even coming off opiates and stuff. It's really helpful. A lot of people struggle with depression and stuff, and I believe wholeheartedly that the CBD oil is much better than a lot of the pills that we're given. I know for myself, since I've started using THC and CBD oil, I'm not on any of the pills I was on that made me like a zombie. I was not able to do anything except sleep. Weed has really helped me. Just smoking has helped me be able to speak at these functions, to hold my head high, to eat, to not be sick off my medication that I have to take, and to stay off. For myself, I have to be abstinent, and it helps me to stay abstinent of the drugs that I can't use. So I think that should be available in detoxes and treatment facilities. And thank you.
Thanks.
I fully agree. I actually did the same thing. So to get me off crystal meth, cannabis was the one that actually has me there and maintains it. One of the reasons why the crystal meth was my drug of choice is because I have ADHD, and I never actually took the ADHD medication. So it's always been self-medicating myself. So cannabis, CBD, and all this stuff has really helped out a lot.
Thanks for sharing.
I think cannabis is a super important component to the work that we're doing. One of the things that we've had to do, because we can't seem to secure any funding from the health authority for the most part, is relying on the cannabis industry to help provide us with funding. I think that there is some understanding too amongst a lot of the large cannabis growers that there is a social responsibility there to provide back to the work that we're doing on the ground as people use drugs in our drug user groups. And I think that the other thing too that's important about cannabis is that it is one of the, it's sort of, this is how we're going to roll out the decriminalization of cocaine, of heroin, you know, of methamphetamines. So it's the same process. So I think to me that's one of the most promising things about the advent of like the legalization of cannabis is that, yeah, we're not reinventing the fucking wheel, right?
Exactly. Thanks, Kevin. There's a question over here.
I just thought it was funny when you asked, like, what can we do for people to get the hint that we need peers to be included, and everybody on the panel there just kind of laughs, because this is the second conference that I've been to in 6 months where Charlene's up there trying to get inclusion for peers and trying to knock it into people's heads. So instead of asking our panel of peers, because since they've been pushing and pushing and pushing for inclusion, maybe ask the room, what can we do for people to get the hint that we need peers included?
Yeah, agreed. It's a
So
question.
instead of the question for the panel, like, what can we do to make people understand that we need more inclusion, right?
Is there?
I don't know if that's a question.